Hello, everybody. I am David Sweeney. I'm involved in international business. International business. I'm an Irish guy living in England, working for a Russian company that's selling a Russian version of an American version of an Italian food concept. So this is a global business, okay? So it's been quite interesting. A little bit about me. I'm from Ireland, as I said. I became a Christian back in 1977, before any of you were born, and when I was a student in Galway. And since then, we've been involved, a lot of my career has been involved in motor racing, and in sales, and in franchising. So they're the three bits that sort of make up where I am. And we're married, a couple of kids living in the UK, and that's where we are. I thought I'd give some context first. If I just sit down, so I can't read from a distance, if I sit down here for a second, and I'm thinking, well, why business? So what's the biblical worldview of business? And one of the things I thought I'd put up here is James. We all know the verse in James. You know, the verse in James 4:13. If you want to look at it, there's a verse there. And James could have used anything. He could have said, well, if you want to go church planting, seek the Lord's will on that. If you want to do this or do that or open up a school. But he actually said, business. And the word he used there is trade. It's emporium in Greek. So actually, James knew about business right back then. So business is a biblical thing. There has been business going on all the time and is recognized in the scriptures. The second one is, if we look at in Exodus, when they were building the tabernacle, God really cares about quality. Craftsmen that were brought in to do an excellent job, and those craftsmen were given the gift and the skills to do that. Furthermore, they were filled with the Spirit and wisdom. And then we move on further into the New Testament, where the apostles had a problem. They had an overload, and the Hellenistic people were not getting the provisions, and they thought, let's delegate it. So they brought delegation in, and they got 7 men to come together, one of whom, of course, was Stephen. So immediately we see that there's delegation, and they would have to put in systems and processes in order to manage that daily activity. So actually, those types of things are really important. And then just a brief introduction here. And one of the things underpinning what we're doing in terms of biblical worldview is what underpins it. And these are really important. And that is scales, measurement. The Lord hates bad scales. If you look at these verses here, we know these verses from Proverbs and other places. Bad scales are not a thing. And the scales are not just if you're selling grain or selling sugar. It's also selling your time, selling your product. You need to make sure that what you give is actually worth the money you're giving it for, and you're actually meeting as high integrity, that you're meeting a need in the people that you're talking to. Now, underpinning this, hello, we've just lost the screen, but never mind. Underpinning this, we know the verses in Colossians and in Ephesians. So Colossians 3:23-24, it says, who are we working for? We're working heartily unto the Lord, okay? So everything we do, whether it's in franchising or anywhere else, we're working heartily unto the Lord. And we have, you know, Abraham Kuyper, whom I think everybody here might have heard of, you know, he says, if a believer's God is at work in this world, and in a sense, God is a working class God. God is working. God is working in this area. Then, in this world, the believer's hand must take hold of the plow. If we're believers, we must take hold of the plow, and in the name of the Lord, be glorified in that activity as well. So we need to be glorified in that activity, whatever that activity happens to be. Now, the wonderful thing is, I was trying to find this, and I couldn't find it the other day. When I read a book many, many years ago about a chap in Russia who was an academic. He was a Christian. He was kicked out of his university and given a job by the government to sweep the streets. So he swept this street. And he swept the street, and he was determined that this is going to be the cleanest street in Russia. And he swept it, and it was the cleanest street. And because he was doing it for the glory of God, not for the glory of men. And he was doing it he was forced to do it. And when they saw that it was the cleanest street, what they did then was they broke the handle on his broom. So now the handle was half the size, so he had to bend down. And it was still the cleanest street in the town. And later they took the handle off him completely, and yet to the glory of God, on his knees, he swept that street every day because he knew it was done for the glory of God. So whatever we're doing, whether we're a professor, whether we're a president, or whether we're a cleaner, we do it unto the glory of God. And that goes across franchising, it goes across sales, it goes across whatever it is we do for a living. So I just escaped from that little presentation there. That's just by way of introducing me. And basically what we're saying is that, hard work is a godly pursuit. And we need to continue to do that. Now, let me see if I can bring this up here. So franchising. Who here has heard of franchising? Okay. Who here has bought something from a franchise? Everybody has. At some point. We've all bought something from a franchise. So there's an awful lot of businesses around. Has anybody ever bought Hungry Lion? Anybody bought Hungry Lion? Anybody bought KFC? There you go. Anybody bought petrol? It'll be coming from a franchise. So franchising is a business model that works superbly well. And it's pretty much everywhere. Now, what are we going to be doing today? I'm going to have to speed up a little bit. The course description, I'll just skip through these because this is already in your books. And actually, what we're looking at here with franchising is two things. What I want you to go away with is a basic understanding of franchising. It's almost like if you've got a sweet and you put it in your mouth, and there's a taste of orange or whatever it is. So you want to have that taste of orange in your mouth. I want you to go away with a taste of what franchising is at the end of the day. And then, so understanding the language of franchising, the terminology and so forth, but also in addition to that, how, if you have a small business today, how can you make that small business grow to become a franchise? How can you use franchising to grow that business domestically or internationally? That's one thing. The second thing is, if you then want to have a business here and you want to go and look elsewhere in the world, like look in France or look in Russia or look in America, and think, actually, that's a really nice, interesting concept. That would work for me in Lusaka, and you can bring that concept into your country and then develop it from here. So they're roughly the things we're doing. I'll skip through these here. So the objectives will be, there'll be a little paper at the end. So just to help you to kind of rewind and recalibrate what you're doing. So there'll be a little paper at the end for those who want to participate in that. So the activities we've already covered on that. And then, okay, there's a few resources to help. There's a book called The E-Myth. And this is a copy of it. Actually, it's not, because I left it at home. On my desk. So I don't have it, but what I do have is a link. So I can, if anybody wants to come to me afterwards, I will send you an email with a link for a free download of a PDF of a book called The E-Myth. But we will touch on some of that later on. Actually, it's probably going to be tomorrow, I think. But we'll have a look at that in a bit. So what else have we got? We've got the workbooks, which you have there. So please take notes in those workbooks, scribble on them, do whatever. They're yours to keep. So they're a kind of a reflection of what's on here. Not word for word, but there's a bit of interaction with those. Now, I've also got a franchise agreement, which I think my colleague, my friend here who was asking about how to assess the legal. So I've got a franchise agreement that I can let people have access to as well. I can give you that electronically. I didn't print them out because they're too heavy to carry too much print with me. And also there's a guide to franchising. And I've got a short video, which I could try and play. But actually, I'll tell you what, I'll skip the video because I think the internet may not be strong enough to do what I need to do with that. Because I have a few people in there, but again, the link to that will be in the information I can send you. Now, how can an entrepreneur use franchising? So the entrepreneur can use franchising in two different ways. One is, like I said, you can have your existing business and say, how can I now take this business and put all the systems and processes in place to then grow that across a whole wide market. And the second one is to create a franchise. you create your own franchise from scratch, or you buy a franchise in from externally. So you can buy a franchise in from the UK or from Russia or from France or whatever. That's one way. But actually what you really are going to benefit most from is taking your own business and franchising that model and growing it internationally. And I'll give you an example of a business in a little while that has done that from a very small town, and they've become they're now in about 25 countries. Now, I will pop out of this one here, and I will just, because there's a short presentation here. So this presentation here, I'm just going to run through this with us because this will give us some very basic questions. We'll answer some very basic questions right now, and then we can go into more detail when I jump back into the other one. So what is franchising? These are the key elements of franchising. The first one is it's a proven business model. So if you are buying a franchise, you're buying something that's already been proven to work. Maybe not in your market, but it has proven to work someplace else. So that's very important. Furthermore, you can't franchise your business unless your business is viable as well, okay? So that's the first thing, so proven business model. You've got things like uniform brand and culture, so you know that if you see a McDonald's in New York and you see a McDonald's in Cape Town, you see a McDonald's in Moscow, they're all going to look more or less the same. So you got the brand and culture, which is uniform across the piece. And they've established a brand position. You know, a brand position, either a luxury brand or you're a mass market brand or whatever that might be. You're renowned for quality or for service. And it'll be that uniqueness will travel with you into different markets. So that's an important part of the franchising model. The rights are granted in exchange for a fee. Right? And normally the fees come in two parts. The first part is an initial fee to open a store or open a branch or whatever it might be. You have an initial fee, and then you have an ongoing royalty. They're the basics in terms of that, in terms of the fees. There are additional fees in some cases if you want to launch a whole new country, but that's a different matter. But the key thing is that all of the systems have to be documented. So everything has to be documented. The systems and processes and all of that everything has to be written down. So then you're policing the system rather than the people. And there's quite a difference there. And all of this is underpinned by our legal franchise agreement, okay? So, and this is something you'll see as I hand the links out for those later on. The franchise agreement is the rule book. And that's the book that tells you all of your obligations and all of the employer's the franchisor's obligations as well. So all of those are all in the same piece. A quick snapshot of some franchises. I mean, there's a whole pile more. I mean, I just took a few that we might recognize, but you can see in here, it's not just about fast food. And it is, Skechers is interesting. Somebody asked about a low entry cost. So what's the low entry ones? Koeman, for example, is an education franchise, and the cost of entry is actually quite low because there's no building involved because you use a hall or you use a church hall or a village hall or a hotel room to run your business from on a weekly basis. So there's some areas that are low entry and others that are more sophisticated. Now, there's two pathways we're going to explore. One of them is creating a franchise from scratch. What do you need to do? The second one is, if I'm going to buy a franchise like a McDonald's and bring it in, what do I need to do in order to explore there? Now, creating the franchise model, so in other words, starting from scratch, what are the things you need to do? Well, what are the benefits to you of doing that? Well, first, you're sharing your passion and your vision. So you're going out to share the passion and vision for whatever it is you do. Could be a shoe repair business, for example. You found a way of doing shoe repair which is really good, really super high quality, and you want to roll that out because this is your passion, and you want to do that. But you want to accelerate, but you don't always have the capital to do that, or you don't have the human resources to do that if you want to do it across several markets. And so you can do that with less capital because you're now getting other people to buy into your brand and your vision, and they're using their capital to grow the business, and they're making a living out of it as they go. You can also grow internationally, and that's a major thing. To try and it's a huge step to take a franchise from a home market to an international market. It's a very big step. One that I've had the pleasure of being involved with on a couple of occasions, and it's quite exciting to do. You also amortize the development costs over a wide area. So if you want to bring in, if you're in the restaurant business and you want to create a new menu, there's a lot of costs associated with creating a new menu, with food, supply, R&D chefs and all of that. If you only have one restaurant, those costs are the same. If you have 1,000 restaurants, that cost just vaporizes over 1,000 restaurants, and you've now amortized your development cost and your ongoing costs. So you can always be developing things and always being fresh and new in the customer's eyes. You've got really good partnerships. You might have created the brand, but by bringing other people into the family, as it were, you're bringing more mental horsepower to the party, and that's really important because other people come with great ideas which you can assess, and if they're good, you can then roll them out through the franchise as well. If you create your own franchise, you then create several income streams. You have your own stores that are doing whatever, let's say a shoe repair business, and that's doing really well, and you're making a profit on this. But you're also then getting a small income from maybe 100 other stores. It might only be 5% of their turnover, and it seems like a small amount of money. But actually, if you have 1,000 of those, all of a sudden you've got your eggs in several baskets, right? So you can spread everything out, and the whole thing becomes more stable and less risky within that. Now, if you don't want to create your own, what do? You think, oh, okay, I want to buy a franchise from someplace else and see what that is. So what are the key things here? The great benefit here is the systems and processes have already been created. Somebody else has already done that. So you're thinking, wow, this is good. I don't have to go through the pain of creating all of that. And it mightn't be your skill set or your natural gifting anyway. So somebody else is already doing that. And it's proven. You'll then have the support of the creator of the brand. So you've got the franchisor, and they're there, and they're helping you out. They're creating. They're almost like a parent, and you're almost like one of their children. So now you're in their family, and you're getting all of that support from head office or from the franchise creator, and that's an important part. That's one of the great benefits of doing it. You don't have that hassle. You can just focus on delivering it at the street level, as it were, and they can do all of the heavy lifting in terms of creation and new systems and processes. It makes raising capital easier. One of the little clips in the video, which I might show you later on, depending on how much time we have. But one of the things they make is a lady there from HSBC, one of the large banks. And the large banks, certainly in the UK, all of our large banks have a franchise division. So if you go along to the bank saying, I've got a great business idea, the chances are if two of us today went to a bank and say, what do you want to do? I want to open a restaurant. They say, how much money have you got? And you'll say, oh, I've got about 50% of the capital. They'll say, well, you need to get more. They're not going to do that. But if you go to a bank in the UK and you want to say, open a Domino's pizza, and you say to them, how much is it going to cost? It's going to cost me £300,000 to open a Domino's pizza. And I said, how much money have you got? And they say, well, we can lend you 95%. They lend you 95% because you only need about a 5% deposit for the total project, because they know that the systems and processes in Domino's and the rigorous way they assess people and locations and their strength of their marketing and their technology, that you're almost guaranteed success. So they know it's less risk having a franchise because it's already proven, whereas if you and I go in on our own, they'll say, yeah, you're nice people, but hey, we're not going to take a chance on you because we don't know how good or bad your business is going to turn out. And then one of the things we have within the company I work for is Dodo Pizza. Dodo Pizza, you can Google it when you get home if you look at dodobrands.io. It's an amazing company. And we work there, and we have now created a whole franchise community. We have about 1,200 stores roughly across 2 brands and 23 countries. So we've done that, and that's really cool. But now we've now created a franchise community of about 200 or 300 people who are actually there. I was in Lagos, in Nigeria, not so long ago, and I'm off to Dubai next week. And we've got people in Moscow, and I was talking to people yesterday in Serbia. So we've got all of this community which comes together, and they've all learned various things, and we put that on a system called knowledge base. And our knowledge base is a little bit like our internal YouTube. So if you have a problem with an oven, or if you have a problem with making dough, or you have a problem with sourcing something, the chances are somebody else in the network has had that problem before, and we've created that community. So that's all there to support other people. There's continual development. All of the time we're continuing to develop the franchise and the marketing. And that's really important, because then there's uniformity across the whole piece. And it's somebody who can do it elsewhere. And we've got marketing experts. And that is their training. That is their career. You can then focus on execution, rather than just having to have all of the hassle of developing product, developing marketing, and everything else. You can actually go ahead and just do the day job. And that's really, really rewarding. So that's one of the benefits of there. So which is the right path for you? Well, systemizing your current business, we'll deal with this in more detail later, but systemizing your current business brings all of those things. So the lady here who asked me about this, well, these are all the things you need to do, is document absolutely everything. Every piece of processing has to be documented, define the franchise offering, defining the customer offering, and all of those things. And then you have the legal side, registering international trademarks and franchise agreement, and which jurisdiction legally do you want to be under, and so forth. So all of those paths you have to go down and start thinking about. But it's a path that's well trodden. So it seems a bit scary to begin with, but actually, once you start going down there, it's just one step after the other. So that's okay. And then the other one is, well, actually, if you're going to go globally, keep an open mind about the sector. I'm always perplexed by the amount of people I know who are in the pizza business. You know, if you ask an 8-year-old kid out on the street today, "Hello, son, what do you want to be when you grow up?" I guarantee you, none of them will tell you, "I want to be a pizza guy." Nobody ever says that, right? But I've come across civil engineers. One of my best friends, Mohammed Mahmoud. Mohammed he's a cardiac surgeon, but he's in the pizza business. He gave up medicine to go into the pizza business. I know other people who are civil engineers and they're in the pizza business. So all sorts of people have come from all sorts of industries, because the common thread is systemization. And engineers in particular are very good at following a system. And so we've got some really good friends in this industry who've come from very strange places. And I also have a good friend in Ireland, and he's in the clothing business. He's got a Benetton franchise, so he sells Benetton clothing. He knows nothing about clothing, I can tell you, but he knows about business, and is doing well. Here's a few high-level stats. I will deal with those again later, but just to tell you, it's a big business. It's a multi-trillion-dollar business globally in franchising. A little bit, this is the company I work for, but I'll deal with that in a little bit more detail later. I'll skip over that. Richard Branson, Richard Branson, who set up Virgin Airlines, a great story on that. But I love this thing. He says, a business is simply an idea to make other people's lives better. So you need to set up, unless because you're in criminal activity, well, we don't want to do that. But you want to make other people's lives better, and that's what a business is. You're meeting people's needs. People will come back for more, whatever that happens to be. And I will deal with the structure of franchising later, because sometimes when I work within the franchising network, people think, oh, our customers are pizza customers. Well, actually, although I work for Dodo Pizza, I don't have any pizza customers. I don't sell pizza. I sell a business opportunity, and that business opportunity creates pizza, and they sell pizza to their customers. So the key needs, we'll do that in more detail. You can get unlimited growth with franchising. We can just grow and grow and grow. And that's one of the real positive parts of this. There's predictability and consistency. That's really important. You don't want to go back to a restaurant tomorrow. Well, what if you went into, I don't know, McDonald's, and today and you got really bad burger. And I said, oh man, yeah, I don't want to go back there. One of the reasons we go to these places is because we get consistency each time we go there. We also try to focus on getting a good return on capital and do that in a timely fashion. And what you don't want to do is to try and work on these things for years and years and not ever see any money coming back out of it. So if I run on to a little bit on the history of franchising, this is covered very well actually in those handouts, okay? And because we're a little bit pressed on time, I won't go into a huge detail on this. But, where is franchising in the Bible? Let me give you a hint. Matthew. What was Matthew? What was his job?
Tax collector.
He's a tax collector. So who is he collecting taxes for? The Romans, exactly. So they granted the rights to have a franchise or to have a tax collecting booth in this particular area. And so effectively, we could say that franchising goes way back into biblical times. But the real expansion came in the Industrial Revolution and all of that. So we know a lot about those things here. Merchant guilds as well, certainly in London and other places like this, where you have to be approved. Your skill set has to be approved in order for you to trade and to practice. And in some ways, that was a form of franchising. The Singer sewing machine is one of the big ones that everybody uses in franchising, because the Singer created the sewing machine with the pedals working and later on electrical, and you could become the Singer sewing franchise for a particular county or city or whatever it was. And that was really big. A lot of the hotels and inns, like in the UK, there are lots of brewery companies. And in fact, most of them don't make beer anymore. Most of them are in the hospitality business. They have hotels and they have restaurants and so forth. And in fact, one of them, Whitbread, based in Luton, they're more famous today for Costa Coffee and for Premier Inn than they are for any of their beers, because they don't make brew. To my knowledge, they don't actually brew anything anymore, but they're actually in the hospitality business. But you can buy, in some cases, you could then buy, say, like a Costa Coffee or a Starbucks or whatever it is. You can buy those things as they grow. Just some of these ones here across the piece. We know most of these, I think, here. Most car dealers are franchised. You can have a Ford dealership or whatever it might be, and fuel stations, estate agents, many of these. This number we looked at before, but I mean, it is a very big industry. Right there across the piece. Some of these ones we looked at just now. Now, terminology. So this is one of the things that people always get confused with terminology. The franchise is the actual business model, okay? So it's the business model. So if you take, say, Domino's Pizza, the business model is there. So it's like it's the whole thing that's been created. It's the system, it's the process, it's the technology, it's the menu, the training, all of the knowledge base. All of that is the franchise. So that's the franchise. And who owns the franchise? The franchisor owns the franchise. So that's the next part. So the franchisor is the creator of the concept. Okay? So the franchisor created the concept in the first instance. And they own all of the IP, all the intellectual property is owned by the franchisor. So that's the company, that's the head office, as it were, that owns the brand and the systems and processes that have been created. Now, if you then want to grow that, and they start growing that stores of their own, and they'll franchise into other places, but if they want to go into a new country, they're not going to go there on their own, because they're just not going to be able to spread their people that wide across several countries. But they will want somebody in that country, and that person will become what we call a master franchisee. Okay? So when I'm developing into new countries, like coming in here into Zambia, I'm looking for a master franchisee. So the master franchisee then becomes almost like the franchisor in the country, but the master franchisee is the one who basically controls everything in the country. And they pay a fee for doing that. They pay the fee, and then they have to do all of the work. And actually, from the time we sign an agreement with somebody to become a master franchisee until they open their first store, it's probably going to be 12 months. because they have a lot of groundwork to do in order to get there. Even though the system has already been created, it takes that length of time to localize everything, get the property of the property-based franchise, and start developing all of these things within that. So it'll probably take them at least 9 months, maybe 12 months, maybe even 15 months to open up their first store in that area. But the master franchisee also has the rights to do this. They can sub-franchise. So the master franchisee can then sub-franchise to other people in that country. Right? So if I get I'm based, let's say, in Moscow. I've got this concept, and that's the franchisor. The master franchisee is based in Lusaka. He then wants to sub-franchise to other people in this market. So let's say Livingston, he doesn't want to be traveling to Livingston, so he wants to open up a franchise there. So he will sub-franchise to an individual in Livingston who can open up the appropriate number of pizza stores in Livingston. It could be 6 or 10 or whatever the number. So they will. So then it cascades down, but it's kept tightly in control all of the time. You can also have what we call an area development agreement with somebody. So, for example, the person in Livingston who might just open one store, but actually they might say, no, I want to have the rights to have all of this whole area, and I believe I can open 10 stores here over this, let's say, a 5-year period. So you grant them an area development agreement, which will have an X and Y axis of a timeline plus however number of stores they think they can open in during that timeline. So that's important within that. So that's kind of the terminology. So it's like the franchisee, the franchisor, the master franchisee, all of these things, you begin to try and understand how the pyramid sort of looks in terms of the org structure of the business. So here we have the franchisor as the brand creator. The master franchisee can open up other countries. You got a franchisee and sub-franchisees and maybe an area developer. So there's all the distinct kind of titles, but they're pretty common across pretty much the whole industry with what we're doing. Then we have other nice areas, franchise agreement. So the franchise agreement is a document under British law. The franchise agreement is fairly thin. It might be about 40 pages. If you're under American law, it'll probably be, I don't know, whatever, 200 pages. They'll love it in America. So the franchise agreement is an important part of the documentation because that sets out all of the franchisor's obligations to you and all of your obligations to the franchisor. So it's a two-way street. So we know what's in there. We will touch on this in a little bit more detail after we've had a break. But there's a thing that's known in the industry called a franchise disclosure document, or an FDD. Now, an FDD is very big in the States, and I will go through that in a little more detail. We don't have it in most markets outside of the US, but it's very important when it comes to you assessing the brand. If you want to buy a franchise, it becomes very important that you can dig deep into some of these areas. And I'll show you how to do that because I'll show you some of the areas we have within that. Within the franchise, there's about 25 areas that you need to probe if you're trying to buy a franchise. And if you're trying to create a franchise, these are 25 areas that you need to be aware of and at least deal with in case anybody does the due diligence on you. An operations manual. An operations manual is something we'll have a little more of an explore of later on. But an operations manual sets out absolutely everything that has to be done in a particular way. So if you, for example, if you have, there'll be an operations manual for making a Big Mac. And it'll have, the bun has to be toasted. The patty has to be put on here. The cheese has to go on top. There has to be 3 slices of pickle put on in this particular way. There has to be 1 squirt of tomato sauce and half a squirt of mayonnaise. Then there has to be another layer of bread, and then there has to be cheese. It's done absolutely the same way. And you train people because you have the methodology. So it's not just 30 people working there and you get 30 different options. You always get the same thing. So the operations manual is what helps people, and then you train people around that operations manual. Now, into legal. Where are we going here? Legal, yeah. So you're right, franchising. When you franchise, you will encounter a lot of legal documentation, okay? Is it okay to move? you'll encounter a lot of legal documentation with franchising for several reasons. And it's actually really positive for you if you're a franchisee. If you've bought a franchise, it's very important that there are good legal frameworks around what you have. There's an old saying that good fences make good neighbors. So you need to know the boundaries. And having the legal documentation, they give you, as it were, invisible boundaries about the rights and responsibilities of that. And they apply to you and also to other people that are investing in the brand. So it's actually very much in your interest that the legal frameworks are there, because they are the rules of the game that everybody has to play to. Can you imagine a situation if you were playing soccer and you left your place here, you're playing soccer in your club, and you went somewhere else, but they were playing with different rules? It would be so confusing. So you need to make sure that the rules are the same for everybody. Now, the franchise agreement is the key agreement that does all of that for us, okay? So if I come out of here and I'll show you, I don't have a printout of this, but I can give you, anybody who wants a copy of this, I can send it to them, okay? And this is a franchise agreement for a company called Lulu's. It's a made-up company, you'd be glad to know. And so Lulu's Pizza, so I thought, okay, let's do Lulu's Pizza. But just to give you an example, if you look there are 33 pages in this one. This is a fairly simple franchise agreement, okay? And you can see all of the areas that are covered in that franchise agreement here. Everything right the way down through, even things like, just for pizza, the menus, the franchisor's obligations, the franchisee's obligations. All of those things are covered in here in paper and ink, so people know exactly where they are. And so you don't police the people, you police the agreement. And the agreement is what people sign up to take on board. And so they've made the commitment to sign up to this agreement, and the franchisor has also put in place the agreement to keep their side of the agreement. And it goes on. So all the terminology at the beginning, those of you who are studying law will be familiar with this type of document. So you can see it's quite a comprehensive document. If anybody wants a copy of this or a link to this document, I can send it to you. And of course, it's signed in blood at the end of the thing. So you're signing up for this, and it's a proper document, right? So this is a fairly simple franchise agreement, but for those of you who have not seen one before, I'm very, very, very glad to share that with you. It's based on a company that I was part of an acquisition of several years ago, and I've modified it to sort of protect the innocent, as it were. Now, the other thing is trademarks. Trademarks are important in both directions. If you're trying to set up a franchise and trying to grow your own franchise, trademarks are very important. What you don't want to do is one day you want to open up in Oman, let's say, and you go to Oman, but somebody else has registered your trademark. You don't want to do that because it's going to cause you a problem. And so what you want to do is register the trademark, and it's not a cheap exercise, or anybody studying law will know how complex that is, but you need to do that, and you need to do it probably not in all of the countries that are recognized internationally, but probably for the top 10, top 20, top 50 that you're targeting over the next 10 years. So at least you begin to do that, and you begin to get some traction. So trademarks are very important. Copywriting and patents as well. There may be particular things that you want to have copyright over. Sometimes it's to do with technology, with modern technology, with software. Other times it's to do with systems and processes that you may have developed. And it's fascinating when you go into the detail of some of these things. Who here knows an espresso coffee machine? Yeah, so an espresso coffee machine. This is something you don't know, but when you go home and you go to your Nespresso coffee machine, take your finger and put it inside where the coffee interfaces with the capsule, and it's not smooth. It's actually serrated all the way around. And the genuine Nespresso capsule has a rubber seal all the way around that, and that rubber seal is pressed against the serrated edge, which gives it a really solid seal. If you try and refill that and put it in, you get a weak coffee. You don't get the same, because they're running 21 bar. It's a huge amount of pressure going through that, but they seal it with this thing. And that's what's copyrighted within the Nespresso system, is that serrated wheel and the gel around the inside of the capsule. And so when you buy imitation ones, they don't come, and they don't with the gel, and they don't perform as good. So anyway, but they've copyrighted that, and that's a really important part of their development. And all companies need to look at what's unique to them. What have you developed? Now you want to protect that, because you've put a lot of your energy and cost in developing it, so you now want to protect it, and our legal friend will pull the documentation together for you to do that. Now, with a lot of companies, we're moving on to the whole area of SaaS. You know what SaaS is? SaaS is software as a service. So the olden days where you used to buy software and you get a disk and you have to put it in your machine. Now we don't even have a place for a disk in our machine, and you don't do that anymore. We now get software and we download it, and it just goes in, you sign the agreement and so forth. Within the restaurant industry, there are companies like ourselves, and we develop our own software. We have about 300, maybe 350 people working in various areas of IT, and we develop software which is totally unique to our company. And it is end-to-end. The app on my phone, I can order a pizza on it in Lagos. I can do the same in Dubai, the same in the UK. The same app, and that runs right the way through the system, the production system. It takes into account HR. It takes into account supply chain, reordering. It even then tracks, it then goes on to the driver's dispatch, and the driver can be tracked like an Uber app or like a Yango app. You can see the driver coming to you with your pizza. So all of that is software that's developed by us. We give it to people under license, and that's another agreement that we've had to create, which is a software as a service agreement. So the SaaS agreement is something else that you will encounter more and more. The other agreement you'll come across in on the legal side is property. If you're a property-based franchise, and there are, because they're also non-property based, like a Cumin Maths, for example, Cumin Education, that's not property-based. You get that, and you have a territory. But if you have a property-based franchise, you will probably have to lease the property. Most probably you won't buy the freehold. You'll lease the property, and then you'll start doing a lot of leasehold improvements. You'll start painting it and decorating it, putting up new signage, maybe putting in new facilities like toilets, generator, refrigeration, extraction. All of those things are going in there, and they're costing you a lot. And you can't just pack them all up tomorrow and go. So you need to have a property lease that will run coterminous with your franchise agreement. So if you have a 10-year franchise agreement, you also want to have a 10-year property agreement. So both of those will run concurrently. What you don't want to do is have your franchise agreement extend beyond that, because you want to have a property to operate in, and you want the property to disappear before the other one. So you need to make sure that that's there. So you need good legal advice when you're setting this up. And then you're collecting data. You're collecting consumer data all the time. So if you're selling something online and everything else, you're getting this consumer data. Big question, who owns the data? Do you own the data as the franchisee who has the shop in, say, in Lusaka? You have a pizza store here. Do you own that data? Or does Dodo own the data? Big question. And actually, for the most part, it's the franchisor that owns the data, not the franchisee. So you can't sell your data to somebody else, or you can't market to them, say something else, like you also have, let's say, I don't know, a coffee concept. You can't send them information about your coffee concept because they haven't opted in to do that, because it's not your data to market through. So you need to just be careful when you walk into this legal sort of quagmire, just to make sure that all of that's in place. Now, the key things in the franchise agreement, I just showed you the whole document going up there, but the key things in the franchise agreement that you need to have, this is the key stuff you need to look at in there. One is the use of trademarks. What trademarks can you use and so forth? And people do change trademarks from periodically, mostly visually, artistically, just to make it a bit more current in terms of its look and feel. But the trademark is important. The location of the franchise. If you have a property-based franchise, location is really important. Like our friend here was asking about restrictions of trade. What you don't want to do is open up a Skechers shoe franchise here and find somebody else has opened one just down the street. because you're diluting your trade. So the franchise agreement should have the geographic area ring fenced so you know what your area of primary responsibility is, and you can trade within that with the security of knowing that the demographics in that area are going to be people that are the right kind of people for your business, but also that you're not going to be competing with yourself, as it were, with your brother down the road who's opened the same concept. The next one is the term of the franchise. In other words, how long? It starts on the 1st of January 25 and it runs for 5 years. It's going to and so at the 1st of January 2030, you've got the rights to renew. What are the rights? What are the strings attached to the renewal of that, say, after a 5-year period? And mostly, they're not onerous. Normally, what they do is use that as the kind of a time to check that everything is okay. It's a kind of systems check. Is the store clean? Do you have the current branding? Are the hygiene standards right, and so forth? So they will try and look at ways of renewing that. So the term is really important. And then the fees. Fees are, openness and transparency is really important in business. And fees, how much do you pay? So I could talk about Dodo because it's all online, it's developed. If you want to open up a Dodo franchise, say the rights to open up in this country is $150,000 US. And then every time you open a store, you pay another fee of $5,000 every time you open a store. And then your sales, we take 5% royalty on those sales. So they're the fees. Now, we don't charge for SaaS. We don't charge for the software. That's part of the 5%. That's part of what's going on within the business. So actually, it's quite a lean business model, this one, in comparison with others I've worked for, where the entry fee might be more like $1 million. And the opening fee might be more like $20,000. And they also charge, as well as 5%, you also have to buy software externally to run the business. So we try and keep it as lean as we can, because the philosophy is to try and push all of the cost savings right down to the street level to make the enterprise, the store on the street, profitable. Because if that's profitable, everything else kind of cascades from that. It's like, our mum taught us, if you look after the pennies, the pounds look after themselves, right? So if you look after the pennies, and then if you push that down and you get the margins right at the street level, then everything else cascades and everything else works. If you're too greedy up here at the corporate level and you're in this for the short term, you bleed things dry and you're not going to be successful. So that's important. Obligations and duties. On the whole area of fees and payments, you do need to be careful that the franchisor supports you with marketing. And that's a very key part. But also, as a franchisee at the store level, you will also have to do some local store marketing. Because at the end of the day, you're going to know your territory around that. They'll do the branding and they'll create the online things and so forth, and they can be pushed down. But when it comes to actually the normal franchising is the normal day-to-day marketing is done at the local store level. Because one of the key reasons people want to buy a franchise is because they can't sell. Most people can't sell. They go, oh, I've got this great idea, but I can't sell. What am I going to do? Oh, I'll buy a franchise. And then they think customers come to them. But actually, they don't. I had a situation in the UK many years ago, and I worked for Papa John's. There was a franchisee that we brought on board, and he had a number of garages. He used to have fuel stations, and he sold his fuel stations because he wanted to get into the pizza business. Now, he came into the pizza business, and his store failed. It failed after maybe a year. It just wasn't performing. We started off with really good sales, about 17,000, 18,000 a week, which was good in those days. It dropped down to about 4,500. His break even was around 7. So he's losing money. And we went to and started talking to him, and he said, have you done, what about marketing? Oh, yeah, I did all of that. I was like, when? Well, when we first opened, we did all these leaflets and we did all of that. So we've done the marketing. But you see, his mentality was, he was coming from a filling station business. Now, all of us here have different cars. Nobody has ever sold you petrol in your life. Never. Have you bought it? Yes. Every week you buy petrol. But there's a subtle difference between you having to buy something and somebody actually selling you something. And you don't buy from this garage all the time. You might do if it's really near your home, but mostly you buy when your fuel gauge goes down and you run in. It's what we call a distress purchase. You have to go in. You've no choice. You're going to walk home or you're going to buy petrol. You buy petrol. So that's what you have to do. So his mentality was that you don't have to do marketing. I build my petrol station. People used to come and buy petrol. Open a pizza store. People will come and buy pizza. That isn't what works. He had to go and do marketing. So he didn't know how to do local store marketing. Anyway, he sold up, he moved on. 2 young lads bought the business. Their sales are 35,000 now because they're out doing marketing. They're doing leafleting, they're getting involved in the community. They're doing all of the things that you need to do. They're doing all the social media stuff, and their sales are right up there, and it's a profitable store. So there's a difference. So marketing is one of the key things, and some franchisees will charge you extra for marketing support. So just investigate that if you're assessing your franchise. Restrictions on goods and services. I think we touched on that earlier on. Have anybody ever come across a movie called The Founder? Okay, take a note of it. The Founder. It's about Ray Kroc. Ray Kroc. What's Ray Kroc famous for? Anybody know? No, he didn't invent Crocs, those lovely shoes that we all like at the beach. Ray Kroc was the guy who systemized the McDonald's franchise. There were two McDonald's brothers, and he then came alongside them, and this movie is about that journey. And he began to systemize the system, so the whole burger thing. He was amazed at what McDonald's had created, but he was the one to take it to the next level. Now, one of the things in there was he sold a franchise to somebody, and then they began to offer all sorts of other things. And he went along to see the store, and it was a mess. There were all sorts of things on offer, sandwiches, and there's chicken, and, tacos, there's everything for sale. But he said, no, we can't do that. We have to bring it back to the core business. So they want to restrict what you could only sell in that franchise, what's approved. And you might come up with an idea, and that's great. And then that goes through an approval system and assessment and everything else, because you can't always come up with a new menu. And one of the other key reasons in the food industry, I've had people who brought in I brought in my own product. Oh, that's really interesting. What's it like? Tell me about it. And they show me the product, and I taste it. And it doesn't matter whether it's a great product or a really bad product. That's not the point here. The point is that we don't know what the nutritional values are in that. We don't know what the allergens are. So we can't put that on the documentation, and we're legally obliged to do that. Now, he didn't understand that. He came up with this product, but actually he could be poisoning people, and we don't know. Who's going to get the blame? Me, right? So no, there has to be a system so we can actually do that in a way that ties it in. Renewal and termination, yes. Will all franchises work? No, they won't. We will close down some as well as open some. Some of them you close down for commercial reasons, because for whatever reason the location hasn't worked out. And there could be a myriad of reasons for that. But there are also times when the rug is pulled out from under you. We've had situations where you open a property, open up a pizza store in a location, and 2 years later, on a 10-year or 20-year lease, 2 years later, the local authority decided to make it pedestrians only, or buses only, or something like this. So we can't really operate effectively out of it. We had an incident like that in Brighton, on the south coast of England, and he's actually ended up opening a cafe because you couldn't, even motorcycles coming in to do deliveries were getting tickets from the government, and you got £60 fine. You can't do that. So we ended up having to shut the store down, and he's opened a cafe there instead, because a cafe is fine for footfall, but it doesn't work for pizza delivery. So you need to be careful. So renewing the franchise agreement after a certain period of time, that's a point apart for real good assessment. And then if you want to, how do you transfer that, or if you want to sell it? You want to sell the business. And you'll always find that. You'll find people say, well, I've opened up 5 stores or 10 stores. I've got to a point in my life where I want to retire. What do I do with this? Can I sell? Yes. And there'll be conditions about how you sell that business in the franchise agreement, and the methodology of how to do that. And so all of that is in there. If I knew how to do this right, it would be good. Aha, FDD. So the FDD, what is it? The Franchise Disclosure Document. So if you go into any American company online, go into their website, any American company, and that's franchising, you'll probably be able to download their FDD. That's quite a common thing to do now. So it's a suite of documents that's created by the franchisor and be given to prospective franchisees so they can make a complete assessment of what's going on in there. There's a link in here. I think that link is also in there. Lustus Law is an American legal firm based in New York. They have a lovely page on FDD. So it's really a good place to find out. Lots of them have, but this lawyer, she's particularly good actually, and she's got some really good information on her website that's worth looking through. But this is just a list of some of the things to consider. So the background information. So you've got background information on literally everything about who set the business up, when did they set it up, what's the story behind it, and so on. And some of the story will be a rock solid story. Sometimes stories get a little bit embellished, particularly if marketing people get involved. And so they always like to polish things to make it look the best they can. But what is the company's leadership is very important. If you look at companies that trade on the stock market, one of the key things in the stock market is looking for is the leadership team. Is that leadership team really solid? Is it trustworthy? Are they people with a track record of making businesses successful and so on? So the leadership, and what's their history? Then we could start doing some digging to see where the dirt is, Are there lawsuits? Have there been lawsuits? Have they kept their word, Or have they reneged on their word? Have they been taken to court and have they lost or why and whatever? So what are the lawsuits? Trying to understand what all of that is. Bankruptcy history. Bankruptcy is a thing it's a red flag, and yet until you really investigate it, there might be some genuine reasons for it, but you need to understand anything to do with bankruptcy in the past history of the people involved and in the company as it's grown to where it is today, but then also the franchisees that they've opened up. What's the failure rate been? So if somebody's opened up in this city or this country, has there been a failure rate, and have those people gone bankrupt and whatever that is? So they have to disclose that information to you. The fees and payments, we've covered a lot of that, so they have to all be disclosed in there. Any recurring fees that might be in there, and sometimes obligatory occasional fees. So for example, the marketing people might say, we want to run a marketing campaign on television around the World Cup, and that's going to cost you an extra 3% for the duration of the World Cup, which is 2 weeks. So we're going to charge you an extra 3% for that 2-week period. So what other things are in there? So they'll have to disclose those where they can. The estimated initial investment, what's that going to be? One of the questions I get asked all the time, how much does it cost me to open a store? And there are various ways of answering that. Somebody said, so you could answer, I've heard people say, the franchise fee is $5,000. Oh, is that all it costs to open a pizza store? No, it's not. So then you think of bricks and mortar, the leasehold improvements, the lease, the franchise agreement, the legal fees, all of those things in there. The full project in most markets is, I would think the lowest end is probably $130,000 US dollars to open a pizza store. And on the high end, we're looking at $500,000. So it'll be somewhere in there. But the figure I normally use for people for the construction side of it is about 1,200 pounds sterling per square meter, which, if you open a 100 square meter store, that's 120,000. Plus on top of that, you've got all of the fees, marketing, launch, and everything else. So you're pushing into close to 200 very quickly to open a store. So they're the kind of, so you need to really drill in. And sometimes, one of the good questions to ask is, what question am I not asking that I should ask? Because you don't know the questions to ask always, and they'll only ever tell you the information that they want you to hear. And so just be careful that if you're going to assess a franchise, that you assess it with people who know what to do and what questions to ask. Principal obligations, what are they going to be? The franchisor's obligations. Territory protection, like we talked about, well, how's that going to be? That'll be documented in there and how that's done. The trademarks, and the copyrights, and then the day-to-day operations. What's the day in the life of a pizza operator look like, or a day in the life of my shoe repairman? What does that look like? When do I open? When do I close? And it's important to know what that is, because some people, like if you're in a legal practice franchise, and there are legal practice franchises, because there are some lawyers that are really good at lawyering, if that's the term, but actually they couldn't run a business to save their lives, right? one of the challenges I have in business, I deal with lawyers a lot, is please send me an invoice. I need an invoice because I want to pay you, but also I want to be able to do our accounts up. And sometimes I get an email from a lawyer, like 18 months later, oh, I've just been going through my book and I discovered that we haven't billed you for 20 hours of whatever. And I can't remember that far back. And, so actually, they might be good at being lawyers, but they need systems and processes in place to run the business and to be able to do the invoicing and do the payment and pay the VAT and do all of those things. So that's really important. So it's, all of those things are there, the day-to-day operation. And it might be that a lawyer, you might want to buy a lawyer franchise because you can work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. That's great. You can be home at 6 o'clock and, see the kids and watch your favorite TV program or whatever it is, right? And but it's and free at the weekends. But if you open a pizza concept, you're not going to have any time, right? Because you're going to be Friday night, you're going to be there till 1 o'clock in the morning. Saturday night, the same thing. You're going to be working because you get 25% of your business on a Friday night, 25% of business Saturday night. You can't be at home watching TV, and you've got to be there in the store. So you need to understand the lifestyle and the day-to-day operations within that. Any restrictions also have to be disclosed in that documentation. All the renewal and termination and the sale of that, all of the contracts, every kind of, and there'll be samples of SaaS agreements, all those kind of things should be in there, and also any financial statements that you might want to get from any of the organizations that are in there. Maybe not the franchisees, they may not want to disclose it, but the franchisor needs to be able to disclose their report and accounts to you, even if they're not a public trading company. So, Dodo Pizza. Has anybody ever heard of Dodo Pizza? I've got key rings. So if anyone wants key rings, I've lots of key rings. Also, they're bottle openers. So anyway, I've got a bunch of those with me. Now, will this work? I don't know is the question. This might bring me.
Is that the video?
It's not a video. It's a website. If you go onto our website, here you have. This tells you about Dodo. Now, we're not a public trading company. Okay, we're a private company. But we behave like a public trading company. We have a policy in the company called radical transparency. So if you think the FDD is like this, we're like this. We reveal absolutely everything there is to reveal about the business. So you go online. This is live, by the way, right? So this is live, a dynamic website. Today, this number 1144, that wasn't the same when I checked this morning. So we've opened some stores. We've got 5 units open in August, right? We're in 22 countries. Last year we turned over almost $1 billion, $1 billion. And the system sales this week, 25,800. Now if I come down here, I'm only going to show you this because of curiosity. That's our, will it move on there or not?
I think you have to come out of the presentation.
Oh, so sorry guys. Okay. So I escape out of that.
Go to the website.
And that's the website there. Ah, okay, got it.
Now you just need to increase the size.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. So that's what I was talking about up here. All right, so we have 1,144 stores now in 22 countries. And we turned over almost $1 billion last year. And that one on the right-hand side, 25.8, that's our sales this week, okay, across the system. And this is live. This is live information coming through. This is our store in Dubai. I'll be there next week. And we've got other photographs, I think, in Dubai here. And it's always, this is one in Tashkent. This is a new concept we have. So everything is super modern in terms of what we're trying to do with the store. This is a coffee concept. This has been described as an Apple store for coffee, right? It's an amazing place. It's really cool. I have a little video. If anyone wants to see it, I can show you a video on it later on. This is our app, so you can have half and half pizza. Select whichever half you want, and you can play with all of that. Now, if I come down here, this is a crazy area. I go into sales. Now, this is live, okay? So, and I keep saying that because here we can see stores in Russia that have said this is their weekly sales, $103,000 weekly sales in this particular store. And so if I click on here, now they say never work with children or animals or technology because it mightn't work. This is over by the Black Sea. You can see where the store is. And the live link doesn't work, but never mind. I'll come to another one with a live link. We'll try this one here. We'll see where this brings me. Okay. You're now sitting here, and this is live. This is live, part of our radical transparency. Part of radical transparency is that you can see your pizza being made in the store. How cool is that? This is actually live as we speak. So this is somebody here making pizzas. So there's somebody stretching out dough there, passing it down to her left, and the other person's putting the toppings on, and that's going in the oven. So this is live. So as well as getting all of the sales data, you can always run in and see the stores actually live and trading within that. If I go back up here just to the franchising page, and you got various things in here in franchise. So these are the kind of things that need to be disclosed, and we go above and beyond the FDD. This is a pathway for the IT as it runs through the stores. And then down the bottom here, this is live. So where you see something purple going ping, 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 these are people buying pizzas as we speak. Now some of those videos don't work because they may be offline for whatever reason. So since we came on here looking at this, we've had, so since I logged on for 43 seconds, this is live. These are pizzas being made. 187, 218. So there's pizzas being made. You getting hungry? so there's pizzas being made. This is a live dynamic website. So it tells us the pizzas that are being made. They're the franchise terms I talked about earlier. And these are the pizzas, people working in that store. And this is our map. So all these little purple dots that go ping, 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 that's people buying pizzas. So there's a way of taking radical transparency into the 21st century using technology, and you have the assurance. People have the assurance. It's clean, it's hygienic. You can also come to the stores, and you can visit any of the stores in our network. You have to put clothes on. You look like a sort of a guy going into a spacesuit. You put on protective clothing on your shoes and on your coat and a hat and so forth. You have to wash up correctly, and then you can have a tour of the store anytime. Now, you wouldn't advise it on a Friday night. You probably wouldn't be entertained terribly well because they're flat out. But you can come anytime and go anywhere in the store. You can go into the toilets, you can go into the storeroom, you can go into the dough making room, and you can do anything. You can measure things, take photographs. We've got nothing to hide. Radical transparency. And that's one of the key things within the business. And that's what makes us really quite unique in what we do. Anyway, less of me talking about my day job. Let's go back to our presentation. So hopefully we'll get Dodo to come here. It would be rather good. Now I'll deal with a couple of things here, and then tomorrow we'll have a bit less time tomorrow. We'll have Q&A coming in from one of my friends in the UK. We'll do some stuff. This is a book called The E-Myth. E being enterprise, or sorry, entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship, there's a myth. This is Michael Gerber. Mike is described as the world's #1 small business guru. Mike is in his 80s. And he's still going strong. He's still going strong. I join him on some webinars periodically. And this is a book. I have a link on this here, but you can look at this book. There are more modern versions of this out now. He's the more recent ones. There's one with the green cover, which I just got delivered to my house the other day. But this whole thing is the myth of entrepreneurship and the small business culture, particularly of America, okay? And and then the turnkey revolution. So this is, franchising has been described as turnkey, because everything is there. Boom, it's just like, boom, it's turnkey, you just take it, and it's plug and play, you just go and you can roll everything out. So it's a new view on business. The whole turnkey franchising is something that's truly revolutionized business and made the ability for people to get into business, become self-employed and start their own business much easier. And so it's the small business, trying to get small businesses that work. The book is an interesting book because he deals mainly with he runs a story through this of a lady who has a pie shop making apple pies and cherry pies and all of this. And she starts making these pies, and they're beautiful pies and they're really nice. And then she wants to open a second store. Oh, well, man, she can't be in two places at the same time. So how can she bridge this gap of being over here making pies and being over there making pies? And the answer to it is systemization. But he's very gentle in how he tells the story, and gradually you begin to see that actually the business needs systemization and processes in there in order to do it. I spoke to somebody in Nairobi last year. Long conversation, screen call online, and then we decided to have a meeting in Nairobi, and he had 4 restaurants. And he started off with one. He opened up a second restaurant, and his sister joined him in the business. So now that he was in one, his sister was in the other. They then decided to open up 2 more restaurants. Now, he did 2 things wrong here. Firstly, he opened up restaurants without proper systems in place. He also changed the menu. He had 2 restaurants doing meat, basically steakhouses, and 2 more doing fish. So now I'm thinking, oh man, and eventually he had to shut down 3 of the restaurants and go right back to the very beginning again. He got hurt because he didn't have the systems in place. He also began to try and do different things. So he had no economies of scale in supply chain because he was buying fish and he was buying beef, he was buying rice, he was buying veg. Nothing was systemized, nothing was streamlined. So he actually fell over because he couldn't get the business to work. And we're in discussion now about doing other things together. And thoroughly, really lovely guy. And but he learned the hard way that you cannot do this. You cannot just grow. You have to have a system in place to help you do that. Now, one of the things he picks up on this, and I've dealt with that I don't have a booklet anymore, but I've dealt with that where he's dealing, or maybe I do. Yeah, I do. If you look at the area 6 in the notebooks, those of you who've got notebooks, and we look at the various types of people. So here we have the entrepreneur. Now the entrepreneur, oh man, he's the dreamer, okay? And he's always looking at the future. Oh yeah, one day I'm going to have this amazing empire of businesses, and I'm going to grow these stores, and I'm going to have all of this thing. The customers are going to be happy. They can almost tell you exactly. He can describe a shop that he hasn't built yet so accurately that you think it's already built, right? So he's looking at the future, but he's the business emperor. He wants to build and grow the business. He's really the excited type. He wants freedom, He's like Mr. Toad. Remember Toad Hall? As a children's story. He wants the freedom of the road, and he wants to go and just get on the thing and poop, and just drive off. He wants the freedom. So he wants all of this. But he needs to know that the business is run on processes and systems, not just his energy, okay? And so he needs management in there. So the entrepreneur is great. He's a great guy, wants to get going with all of these things, but he needs a manager, right? So he needs somebody behind him that can actually systemize and do all of these things. So the manager is probably Mr. Boring, right? Mr. Boring. He's the guy who's Mr. Boring, and he's the planner. But he's very pragmatic, wants to make sure everything is in place. Now, he often wants to look at the past, not the future, because he'll think back, hang on, somebody tried this before and they made a mistake. how can we learn from that and put in place something that won't fail the second time. So he's going to be looking at the past, trying to understand what happened before, and he's trying to anticipate what the problems will be and put processes in place in order to help that. Oh, he craves order. He wants everything to be nice and neat. And so therefore, if it isn't there, he's going to create the systems and the processes to do that. So that's what he's driven by all the time. Now, Steve Jobs, who knows what company he set up? And he had 2 bites of the cherry, apple, whatever. He had 2 bites of the apple because he was set up Apple first back in the, was it the 80s or early 90s? He set up Apple and it began to grow. And you know, the money men got involved, and he left because he was the creative genius, creative all of the time, pushing the boundaries of thought and consumer behavior to a whole new level that the consumers didn't even know was possible. We have iPhones. Has anybody ever read an instruction manual for an iPhone? Do we know how to use them? Yes, we do. How amazing is it to create a product that doesn't require us to read an instruction manual, but we instinctively know how to work it? That being said, we're probably only using 10% of its functionality, but that's another story. But he created this whole boundary of thought was completely pushed, and he brought everything right down to a whole new level. And so he ended up dropping out of Apple because the money man, the systems guys from Wall Street, couldn't read. He wasn't a process guy. It just was a clash of personalities. He left. Do you know what he did when he left? Pixar.
Yes.
Yeah. So Pixar, Toy Story, who has seen Toy Story? So he was the genius behind all of the creation of Pixar. And then he came back in, and there's 2 big lessons here when he came back in. Firstly, he came back in and he had Tim Cook as his chief operating officer. Now, I heard somebody describe it as probably unfair, but they said that Tim Cook probably hasn't got a creative bone in his body. Now, he probably does, but he's not a creative guy. He's a grey Mr. Boring guy. But he was exactly what Steve Jobs did. And the second time, in 1997, all of a sudden, Apple becomes amazing because you've got the dynamic, bouncy ball creativity of Steve Jobs and the rooted, the grounded, the earth-linked practicality of Tim Cook, and together they've created the Apple that we know today, and that's a huge thing. And the second thing in the story, and it'll relate more to what we're going to do with sales later on, but I'll tell you now anyway, is that people talk about their competition. Oh, I don't like the competition. No, they're my enemy, and whatever else it is. Microsoft and Apple were, they're competing in the same place. And you could say they're real tough competitors. In 1997, as well as Steve Jobs coming back in as CEO, bringing in Tim Cook as his operations guy, they also did a deal with a major investor coming into their company. The major investor was Bill Gates. Bill Gates put $150 million into Apple back in 1997. And with that, all of the Microsoft suite for Mac and all of that came with that. So here's 2 competitors who actually, rather than compete with one another, decided to collaborate, and actually the synergy between them helped grow. And they're both companies have grown exponentially since that time. Now, do you know how a helicopter flies, right? I like flying, right? So helicopter. If you have a helicopter, we know what a helicopter looks like. You've got this wing on top going around this way, and on the tail you've got another wing going around here. If you took off one of those, if you just leave the wing on top here, forget that wing, and you turn it on, the whole helicopter just spins around, but it never lifts. It doesn't go anywhere. It spins around and around in circles. If you take that wing off and throw it away, and put this one on the back, that will just go round in circles. And again, it's doing nothing. So this one up here is going clockwise, let's say. This one here is going anti-clockwise. And it's the tension between those 2 that enables the helicopter to fly. So actually tension in a business is not a bad thing when they're growing this thing, but it's the tension that creates lift in a helicopter. It's one force working against another in a positive way. And in the same way, you have to make sure that you got the right people in there. So Michael Gerber talks about these types of people, the various types of people that are in businesses. Another one is a technician. I mentioned about a lawyer earlier on, and I've dealt with a lot of technicians. Or it might be a plumber. A plumber could be a technician, a really, really good plumber. But the plumber can't, he doesn't have any systems and processes in place. So he can't hire a second plumber, because if he's not there, he doesn't get paid. So he doesn't really have a business per se. He's a plumber, and he does his thing, and then he raises an invoice 2 weeks later or whatever, but he's kind of tied to his place. The same with an auto mechanic. I go to a regular garage, get my car done there, but he has one garage, and he only ever have one garage. He's not going to open up a system that would enable him to have a network of 20 or 30 or 40 garages. And garaging is definitely, car repair is definitely something you could create a franchise model around. But he's very happy just actually doing his thing and having that in there. So you very seldom create equity. So when he wants to sell the business, there's very little equity created. There's very little wealth created in that business. And this happens in consulting. It happens in recruitment, for example. You could have 2 people or 4 people running a recruitment business, but that's very person dependent. It's not system dependent. So if they then want to stop, they're self-employed, but if they stop working, they don't get paid. But the technician needs the other people in the system in order for them to build it up. So in the Michael Gerber book, the link that's on that I'll share with you later, he talks about the fact of the matter is that we have these people, the entrepreneur, the manager, and the technician, and all of us have a little bit of that in there. And I can see my own personality. I'm quite the creative type, but I can't live without systems and processes, and that's kind of the engineer in me, wanting to do that, wanting to have processes in place. So the entrepreneur, he will be free to forge ahead into all sorts of areas of interest. And I've seen this time and again with CEOs who set up a business. It gets successful. They then pass it on to the next tier of management. Meanwhile, he goes off and creates something else. We have that actually in our own business right now. We've created a coffee concept. We've experimented with a kebab concept and various things like this. Because that energy, that creativity doesn't stop. So they want to continue to create something new. And whereas a technician would be really happy just continuing to do the day-to-day stuff. So each of them has something to offer, but we need to do that. Now, when you set up a business, at the beginning, you're into franchise operations. How are we on time? I'll stop in a couple of minutes, but for organization, at the beginning, when you set up the business, you have a load of things to do. But there's only maybe one person, maybe 2 people, maybe 4. And have you heard of a burger chain called Five Guys? Yeah? How many people set that up? Let me guess. 5 guys. Right? And so they set up the business, and they each began to take areas of responsibility in order to be, because otherwise you have the same guy doing the same thing. Oh, I'll do all the purchasing. Oh, no, I thought you were doing the purchasing. No, he's doing it over here. So, no, you have to start pushing it along. And the best way to do that is to create the boxes before you have the people. Because you sometimes find that somebody's been with an organization for 20 years, and Joe dies, or he leaves, or whatever, and now there's a vacuum left behind, and you try and write the job description for Joe's job. Well, Joe's job was, let's say, property manager. But he used to also fix the photocopiers because he knew a bit about that. And he also used to do a bit of the plumbing because he knew a bit about that. And he was the guy who used to liaise with security because he knew a bit about that. Because Joe's been there 20 years. And his job has managed to kind of move out. So when you come to replace Joe, actually you might have to replace Joe with 4 people. Because Joe's job has kind of moved out into his skill set. Because Joe, in a sense, has overstepped his boundary because there was no organization chart in place to actually look at the functions. So what are the functions that you need to look at? So you got somebody who needs to be accountable, CEO, who needs to make sure that all of the legal things are done and that the company has a head, you want to talk to and so on. Then the finance people, typically finance also end up with legal coming into them and IT, and quite often HR, because HR, payroll, they're all kind of linked. So you end up with some kind of a thing happening over there. Then you get production, distribution, then you have supply chain, purchasing and all of that. So you base it on functions. You put the org chart in place based on functions, not on the personalities that are going to be coming on board. So we'll jump into more of that tomorrow. We take up the reins with franchising, And we'll kick off tomorrow by looking at the operations manual and what's in the operations manual and how we can take it from there. So I will park this for now, and we'll have a Q&A. So please, questions?